Congress flirted with yet another government shutdown this week, passing a short-term spending bill just before a deadline that would have shut down the government. The constant brinksmanship has frustrated Oregon Congressman Kurt Schrader, a Democrat who has called for more compromise among his colleagues. Schrader is back from D.C. and joins us tonight to discuss the state of Congress, calls from student activists for gun control after the Parkland shooting, and more. From KGW News, this is Straight Talk with Laural Porter.
Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Laural Porter. Late this week, Congress gave final approval to a massive $1.3 trillion spending plan. President Trump signed the bill Friday after initially threatening to veto it. This puts an end to the budget battles for now and narrowly averted another government shutdown. It would have been the third this year. And the bill includes some wins for Oregon, including some provisions sponsored by Oregon Congressman Kurt Schrader. Congressman Schrader is here to tell us what those are and his thoughts about this weekend's student-led March for Our Lives, demanding action on gun safety. Welcome to my guest, Oregon's 5th District Congressman Kurt Schrader. Thanks for being here. Great to have you back.
Great to be here. Thank you so much.
Let's start off by talking about that spending bill, $1.3 trillion. Hard to get your mind around that much money. It will take the government through September 30th with funding. Is it a big relief to you to have funding, no more government shutdown threats, at least through September?
Absolutely. Hopefully it's a relief to everybody in America. This governing of checkbook to checkbook, if you will, is counterproductive. You can't plan anything. You don't know what's going to happen. I think the agencies, American taxpayers, very difficult to do. So it's nice to have the fiscal year done with. You know, no more continuing resolutions, no more threats of shutdown. Hopefully we can concentrate a little bit more on what America wants us to work on, some of these major issues in front of us right now.
Well, there are some things that will benefit Oregon. What's in there that will help Oregon?
Well, there's a lot of stuff, actually. If you can get past the price tag and the added debt and deficit, there's a lot of good stuff. We worked hard, along with Senator Wyden and others, on the wildfire funding issues, trying to make sure that the Forestry Department to get hit hard like they usually do every year. Their budget gets sabotaged to fight these fires. We put some forest management pieces into that to help prevent some of the fires, make them less catastrophic when they do occur. There's great stuff for the school districts. We boost up special education funding. We boost up Title I funding for the teachers, getting the right training and such. There's a boost in the Pell Grants. Despite the threats to cut them, they got a $195 increase, over $6,000 now for students, and some early childhood stuff going on in there. There was a nod to some of the gun violence stuff. I was pretty shocked. We actually had. So
what made it in there?
What made it in there? The NICS, the National.
So the fixed NICS that we've heard a lot about.
The fixed NICS, fix the background checks, make sure agencies report penalties if they don't, make it a more secure and more comprehensive system. Very critical, would have potentially prevented at least one of the shootings here we've had most recently. We got rid of the Dickey Amendment, which was the amendment that prevented the Center for Disease Control to do any research on gun violence. And now we can actually try and figure out what are the solutions, because we'll have hopefully some information, some research from that agency. We put some safe schools funding in there so that schools can develop plans to hopefully prevent and or deter bad outcomes or worse outcomes from some of these events going forward. And you couple that with the AGs taking the bump stocks off the marketplace. The students ought to feel, they're not going to feel like it's enough, I'm sure, but at least there's been some huge improvements, and I give these students a lot of credit for what we did here just last night.
We'll talk some more about gun safety and the students. One of the reasons that President Trump threatened to veto is because of something not in the bill, and I'll read his tweet today. I'm threatening a veto of the omnibus spending bill based on the fact that the 800,000 plus DACA recipients have been totally abandoned by the Democrats, not even mentioned in the bill, and the border wall, which is desperately needed for our national defense, is not fully funded. The DACA program is something that...
I might disagree with his characterization a little bit.
Well, why wasn't DACA in there?
Well, it seems like it was a president that abandoned the Dreamers when he terminated the program last year. He owns that. We worked hard to try and restore that. I think there was, matter of fact, I talked with our leader several times over the last week. You know, what are we doing to try and make sure that that program gets restored, at least in part? The wall was a huge stumbling block. The whole discussion has spiraled out of control and trying to put visa stuff in it and this and that. Clean Dreamers, Act is what we really need. We're not able to get that in there without some huge wall that was a definite poison pill as far as my Latino community felt. And so what we did do, frankly, good news is no more ICE agents, no increase in ICE agents, which was a big deal. No increase in detention beds, that in the substandard conditions that these poor people live in. And actually this little bit of funding, $1.6 billion, no $25 billion funding for a fence. And it actually does say not a wall. It's actually about a fence, some border security, technology, that sort of thing. So if the president wasn't willing to play ball with us, we certainly weren't going to play ball with him. And the good news for those folks is that we're limiting ICE's involvement and protecting these poor people once they get to this country.
You invited a DACA recipient from Monmouth to be your guest at the President's State of the Union earlier this year. Juan Navarro is one of more than 11,000 recipients of DACA in Oregon. And on March 5th, that was supposed to be the end of DACA, but the Supreme Court delayed that for at least a year. But a lot of DACA recipients and their families still live in fear that they're going to be deported. So what's the way forward now that it didn't get into this bill? Do you think there'll be a separate bill? I
think that's what will happen. There'll have to be a separate bill. I just came from an ag group here in Oregon this morning. We were talking. They were going, Kurt, why can't we do something on immigration? It's a big deal. My high-tech companies tell me, Kurt, it's a big deal. Unfortunately, there's other parts of the country do not see it that way.
And a lot of people in your district feel like the illegal immigration is taking jobs away from Americans.
I don't know if there's a lot in my district. There's some vocal ones in my district. I think the farmers, the business community, labor, faith-based groups, most people in my community and frankly in my state, I think, are on board. It's the other states where these congressmen run afraid from those people that say just what you just said. 'Cause it's patently not true here. And we need to get that fix in. We need to make sure we put some certainty. The courts, unfortunately, by granting them the stay, if you will, saying that the president doesn't have the authority, the lower court said, president doesn't have the authority to terminate the program, or terminate the program. And they say, let it go through the rest of the court system. Well, that just keeps these poor people in limbo until the final say. And I don't think any DACA recipient, their families, their friends want that to be the legal limbo these poor people hang into for the next, I don't know how many months.
We've seen a lot of turmoil at the White House, a lot of shakeup with staff members. The latest one, the latest casualty, President Trump's national security advisor, Lieutenant General H.R. McMaster. And President Trump has said that he will replace him with John Bolton, who's a hardline former U.S. ambassador. What are your feelings about McMaster's departure and his replacement?
Well, not good. I guess my concern as I look at who's coming and leaving in the administration is we're getting into a more yes man type of philosophy for the president. And I don't think that's good for anybody to be surrounding themselves with yes people. You need a person like in my office, more than willing to criticize some of my thoughts and ideas, to make sure I'm thinking about all the ramifications of what's going on out there. No one individual, particularly the President of the United States, can have his hand or her hand on the pulse of everybody's feelings and thoughts and what might be the best course for this country. And you surround yourself with a bunch of yes people, you start to believe you're infallible, and that's very, 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 very dangerous. And with the stuff going on with Iran and North Korea and Russia, I'd much rather have had a McMaster, frankly, than a Bolton.
And Bolton supported the Iraq War. He has talked about a first
false premises got us into that, and he was totally behind that. That's not a good recommendation. What can Congress do, though?
He doesn't require confirmation by the Senate. Should Congress reassert its responsibilities under the Constitution to authorize when the nation goes to war?
Absolutely. We need a new, what they call AUMF, authorization for use of military force. The lines on what's a terrorist group, what's not, has been blurred. What that original AUMF applied to has been, discussed ad nauseum. I think we need to set the record straight, put a new one in. Congress is the body that has the ability to declare war. The president merely carries that out. So if we're at war with terrorism, I want a clear understanding. The American people, the Oregonians, want a clear understanding of what are we in for, and what's the parameters around that? So we need to do that before we go anywhere, any place, and start putting American men and women at risk.
Let's go back to gun safety for a moment. The Parkland, Florida school shooting that left 17 people dead has really revived this debate over gun reform, and it sparked student protests across the country. We had walkouts here, and now there's a nationwide protest.
Remind me of the 60s and 70s.
It does. And there's a protest Saturday, March 24th, called March for Our Lives. There are some marches in Portland and Vancouver, but the big one in D.C. And while we've seen mass shootings before, there's been no major change with gun reform. But students say this time it's going to be different. And we had a student town hall here at KGW Thursday night, and we talked to about 8 students with a cross-section of beliefs from all over the state and from Vancouver. And we asked them about what the students are calling for in this march, a ban on assault weapons, what they think about that. So let's listen to what they said.
I'm for, the Second Amendment. People should be allowed to carry weapons. They have the rights, but I also feel that us as students, we have a right to safe learning. And not only are assault rifles, they cause more damage than a regular handheld gun.
Need assault weapons? It's a civil right. It's a thing we have in the Constitution that gives us the liberty to be able to. You don't need to go to church. You don't need to get a job, but it's a right we have in this country to freedom, and it's to protect us from tyrannical governments and safety here in our communities.
Congressman, would you support a ban on assault weapons and high-capacity magazines?
No, I think that's getting beside the main point, which is the people that are carrying these weapons. And it gets to be very difficult. We did do that in 1994, as you remember. There's a ban on semi-automatic weapons that had a certain look to them. And the jury's out as to how effective that actually was at the end of the day.
I've seen studies that say that mass shootings did go down during that period.
But other gun violence went up using a different type of weapon. And I think people should focus more on preventing guns from getting into the hands of those that shouldn't have them. And that was a big thrust of what the students were talking about. I think that's something Congress can get behind. And frankly, in this bill we just passed, we made the National Instant Background Check system tighter, just as we talked about. Fix NICS was the phrase people were using. We now allow the Center for Disease Control to do research on gun violence, so we might actually know what are the best answers to prevent.
A lot of people don't understand the assault weapons, why people support that, why they would ask, do we need assault weapons? You don't use them for hunting or really for self-defense. Why protect
Well, no,
that
semi-automatic weapons are used for self-defense. They're the weapon of choice to prevent you, and the higher magazines are standard now. Back in '94, your Colt 1911, which held maybe 10 rounds, was an anomaly or was a standard weapon. Now it's very common for most of these handguns to hold anywhere from 13 to 20 rounds. It's not like on TV where you shoot them in the leg or wing them in the arm. You're lucky if you can defend yourself against an assailant that's high on medication and coming at you even from a distance.
Do you have an assault weapon? I know you're a gun owner.
I don't have an assault weapon, but I have semi-automatic weapons to protect myself and to do the shooting.
You often vote with the NRA. The NRA gave you a 71% positive rating in 2016. You were one of only 6 Democrats who voted in December for a bill that would allow people with concealed handgun licenses to carry their weapons in all 50 states. The rest of the Oregon Democratic delegation voted against it. Why did you support it?
Well, I was trying to represent my district. Not everyone in the district agrees with that, but I don't worry so much about people that are trying to get handguns or any type of weapon lawfully. If you're trying to go through the process of a concealed handgun permit, that's not the person I'm worrying about. I'm worrying about the person that's not doing that. And that's why we pushed all these other initiatives, the CDC piece, the Fix NICS piece, making schools a little safer, getting rid of the bump stocks, which the Attorney General did at these students' request, which I think is a pretty big deal. More universal background checks. That's the place where I think you get agreement. And to these students' point, I want some action, and we've gotten some action as a result of, frankly, what's happened here recently.
Some of the opponents of this concealed carry vote say that it makes it too easy to get permits in some states, and it makes it harder for law enforcement to know who's legally carrying a weapon.
No, I don't know about that. I mean, they don't know who's carrying the weapon unless they ask for your identification to begin with. And they can do that. And the thing that's forgotten in this concealed carry legislation is that anyone who concealed carries in the state of Oregon has to abide by Oregon law. So it's not like they get to play cowboy in Wyoming or in Vermont. They actually have to abide by Oregon's gun use. And if a jurisdiction in Oregon does not allow a person to have a gun, they can't be carrying a gun.
To a piece of legislation I know is really important to you. Just this week, there was a hearing on a bipartisan bill you introduced, the National Park Restoration Act. Oregon's only national park is Crater Lake, which is a treasure to so many people. What's going on with our parks that needs attention?
Well, it was the same thing that happened in our state prior to Measure 66. The deferred maintenance is building up. Good news is millions of Americans, thousands of Oregonians like to go to Crater Lake or our state parks, and that caused a lot of wear and tear on the trails and on the camping facilities, the whole 9 yards, and it's tough to keep up. Budgets have been restricted under the last few years, certainly. So we're trying, with sequestration, we're trying to fix that, obviously, in this most recent bill. And my attempt with my colleagues, bipartisan, even Zinke, even the administration's along with us on this, would divert a little of the Land Water Conservation Fund money that is going into the general treasury back to natural resources, which is where it was supposed to be to begin with. And this puts a little bit more money in the till and makes sure that we can actually take care of that deferred maintenance on the state parks, and lets the rest of the money go to a lot of great initiatives we have too in our natural resource area.
Well, Congressman, we need to take a break, but I know a lot of Americans are fearful about fake news. They don't know where to get good information, and Congressman Schrader has some ideas about that, and we'll talk about that after the break. We're back in 2 minutes.